First of all, I wish to thank you all for joining us today for the first in a series of the Doctors of Humanist Virtual Symposium. I wish to thank the authorities from Sechenov University in Moscow and Anuak University in Mexico, and in particular to Professor Andrei Svisunov, the Vice Rector at Sechenov, and Dr. Jose Carrillo, the Dean of the Health Sciences at Anuak. Thank you very much. An event or series of events such as this would not be possible without a great deal of work being put in. And I would like to make special mention to both the steering committees. The main steering committee, which is comprised of Professor Irina Markovina, Professor Joaquin Gea, Professor Jacek Moshvin, Dr. Juan Soriano, and Professor Trevor Gibbs, as well as Mariam Pogosyan, who is a student coordinator. And the local, Dr. Jose Marcos Felix and Dr. Elvia del Campo Torcios. But most specifically to Dr. David Sergio, who has worked for what seems like a minimum of 24 hours a day the last month or the last year. So thank you, David, because without you, this virtual symposium would be completely impossible. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a cloth be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if the promontory were, as well as any manner of thy friends, or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. John Donne, the English metaphysical poet and cleric, wrote these lines in 1623, when he had just recovered from an unknown illness, thought to be typhus, which was rife during the Middle Ages and later. Donne, of the opinion, as many of his ages were, that the disease was brought on by God, wrote up his experiences of the illness and recovery in one of his only prose pieces, Devotions upon Emergent Occasions. Nearly 400 years later, humanity suffers another plague, similar in some ways to those that afflicted mankind during the Middle Ages, most notably the Black Death, but also as recently as 100 years ago, when the 1918 flu, which like today's pandemic was also misnamed the Spanish flu by some. In a recent book by an epidemiologist and historian, Mark Onigsbaum, wrote in his book, The Pandemic Century, infectious diseases nearly always have wider environmental and social causes, unless and until we take account of the ecological, immunological, and behavioral factors that govern the emergence and spread of novel pathogens. Our knowledge of such microbes and their connection is bound to be partial and incomplete. We are experiencing this pandemic. Indeed, it is the first time in my lifetime that there is one shared common experience amongst the whole world, the whole of 21st century human civilization. And that is remarkable. New ways of thinking are taking hold, new trends, new words, new expressions, at least in the English language, but I'm sure in other languages. Social distancing, for instance. But even more interestingly, old expressions have now newer and perhaps more heartfelt. Take care of thyself. Now we say this on a daily basis, but now we say this with real meaning. The words no longer vacuous. Let me quickly touch on how this virtual symposium came about. Only a year ago, in April 2019, after we had finished the second Doctors of Humanist Symposium at Sechenov University, which, as Professor Savistnov mentioned earlier, had been a great success, straight away we sat down to planning the next for March 2020 at Anuak University. I well remember the restaurant where we dined and spoke, and well remember the faces at the table. For all those faces are here today via video conference. After planning for a year, we obviously had to cancel the third symposium. And there was a feeling of dismay and trepidation for what was happening around the world, but also a sentiment of disappointment at not being able to cap a year's hard work with the symposium. From those two converging but conflicting feelings, the idea of a virtual symposium was born. But why not try to get to grips with what is happening to us and to our world, and offer a series of conversations on humanity-related topics to COVID-19 and all that this means to us now, and perhaps all that this could imply for the future. And so I'm very proud to say that we have a series of 9 weekly sessions trying to do just that, or begin to do that. The program is rich. Today, we have a conversation looking at caring for the health professional. Next week, there will be a roundtable made up of students and doctors from around the world. Then there will be a conversation on health narratives in times of COVID-19, followed by a roundtable looking at international experience. On the 28th of May, a Mexican neurosurgeon working in the Mayo Clinic in the US will recount his extraordinary experiences. The next two sessions are personal favorites of mine. The first, Can Poetry Save Us? While the second explores the extraordinary power of music. The last two, the first is a compliment to practicing medicine, while the last would look at medicine and philosophy. For, as Professor Svistov noted earlier, Anton Chekhov said, how easy it is, doctor, to be a philosopher on paper and how difficult in real life. And wasn't it Michel de Montaigne who said, perhaps tongue-in-cheek, to philosophize is to learn to die, or perhaps not. Before I open today's session and introduce the speakers, I wish to return to the words of John Donne, nearly 400 years ago. For now, surely, if ever there was any doubt at all, there is now none. No man is an island. Indeed, I might emphasize a later line that says, any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind. We are all involved in mankind and now need our fellow humans more than ever. Countries or races or any other supposed separations mean even less now than they did 2 months ago. Now is the moment to combine and work together for the common good. Help, aid, support, cherish, love. These are the words that we need to hear now. Take care of yourself, please. Just as we humans are interconnected, don't forget our fragile but symbiotic relationship with the nature around us. Lucy Jones, in her new book, Losing Eden, states, the association between good health and a connection to, or an experience of, a healthy and beautiful natural environment has been entrenched throughout our long history. This is our support system, our oxygen, our blood, and we must protect it now more than ever. I want to finish with a recent publication from a friend of mine and a member of the steering committee, Dr. John Soriano. As this is neither the last outbreak, and with all likelihood, nor the last big one, we need to learn one more lesson from the past. In the future, let's never again take for granted those simple things that during confinement we have suddenly seen as precious. A bear hug, a slap on the back, and of course, a ready smile without a face mask. I have no doubt that medical humanism and the arts are already helping, and they will help us to learn to take better care of our patients, our loved ones, and ourselves. So, with a ready smile, I pronounce the Doctors of Humanist Virtual Symposium open. And I would like very much to introduce my dear colleague and friend, Professor Irina Markovna, who wishes to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I don't really know what's happened, but I think the sound is playing up, as we say. And I think David Therdio will just say a few words, and then we will begin. And at the end, maybe Professor Markovna can speak at the end. Okay, so David, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you all to be here. I'm I'm really excited. I think it's a great opportunity to share our hearts and souls. Well, the important thing I wanted to say is that I'm going to be helping with all the logistics of the symposium. So if you have any trouble accessing the platform, or do you know of anyone who has any trouble, please don't doubt on contacting me. I have shared my mail on the welcome board. So please feel free. As Jonathan said, I'm 24/7 available. So thank you very much, and let's enjoy this conversation.
Okay, so today we're going to discuss caring for the health professional. And for this conversation, we have two very distinguished guests. Professor Jacek Moszpin. Dr. Moszpin is a professor of urology at the Johns Hopkins Medical Institutions. In addition to surgical training, he holds a doctorate in pharmacology. He's a recognized expert in the fields of pelvic urological surgery and clinical lower urinary tract physiology. He has been a member of the Hospital Ethics Committee for more than 25 years and was co-chairman for 7. For many years, he was part of the faculty of the course on patient, physician, and society at the medical school. He became the course doctor from 2005 until 2012. From 1996 to 2012, he was medical doctor of the pilgrimage to Lourdes for the Federal Association of the Order of Malta, having completed 19 pilgrimages with the order. In 2014, he began the project on Lives in Medicine to better study human experience of patients and practitioners. He is currently pursuing research on written biographies and memoirs of patients and practitioners with colleagues at the Centre for Life Writing at Wolfson College at the University of Oxford. He's been a speaker at both symposiums to date, as well as contributing to the online courses, and he's a member of the steering committee. Let me just add that it is a real pleasure to have met him and got to know him, and his support means a great deal to me. And Professor Jose Campos Felix. He is a professor at Aniak University. He is coordinator of the clinical cycles at the university. He is a pediatric oncologist and has a master's degree in education. Indeed, one of his passions, I believe, is teaching, and he has a great interest in teacher training. He has dedicated his life to the promotion and development of humanism as a medical competence. And in his own words, he is inspired by the wisdom of children and the strengths of students. He is one of the driving forces behind the ANUAC, the Doctors of Humanist Connection. And even though we have never physically met, I count him as a friend. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is now a great honor to begin today's session, and the session will be divided into two sections. The first, a conversation between Professor Moshfin and Professor Felix. During this section, please mute your microphones, please. The second section will be open to the public. We wish very much so to hear your questions, and you can ask them directly or via the chat. And when you ask a question, it is courtesy to everybody to start by telling us your name and where you work. So, gentlemen, Professor Moshfin, Professor Felix, I will begin with this question. We are now living through a global health pandemic, one that maybe few of us, if any, have experienced. Do you think that now is the time when we will truly see the relationship between health professionals, doctors, nurses, and the public? Is there something special and universal about this health professional doctor-patient relationship? Who wants to begin? Professor Moshfin.
Well, I'd like to say hello to everyone and greetings from Baltimore. It's early springtime here and all the dogwoods are in bloom outside this room where I'm sitting, so it's a lovely time of the year. And strange that it should be so lovely when we have so much to worry about. Jonathan, I want to thank you for this invitation, and Jose in particular, I want to express my gratitude that the conversation is with you, because when I was at Anahuac in December for a scouting mission for the conference, you and I had a very long conversation at the breakfast table about the nature of our relationship with patients. And it was a very powerful conversation about how personally we become involved. You showed me some of the drawings and pictures of your patients and things they've given to you. And I spoke to you also about my own experiences. So the first thing that emerged in this conversation is how powerful the bond becomes between ourselves and our patients. And I think that's characteristic of our profession. The second thing that you brought up was how this can be brought to the surface and cultivated as an educational goal. So before saying too much more, I would turn over to you and ask about how you see this and how you see the educational opportunities and the educational structure in helping us here.
Thank you all. Thank you for this honorable invitation. Thank you a lot. What can I tell you, teacher, professor? I think we are involved with our patients from the first time we saw them. This pandemic situation, this stressful situation, is even more characteristic. We can find in this fear, in this stressful situation, we can find a, a, a point in we can teach a lot of things. We can share a lot of things. We can live a lot of things with our patients and learn from them, learn from their fear. I think we can do a lot of things that we can do a lot of things that what we can imagine. I can tell you that our patients are living this sickness, this pandemic situation in a very stressful moment. We can teach. In the first time, we have to learn about them, what they are feeling, what they are what they are living in this moment, and then we can take this situation and turn in a very uh, in a very academic work. I can. What do you think about the fear, Professor? Can we learn? The fear is telling us something about what is happening right now.
Well, the fear is an opportunity for people to show courage. And I think certainly the people who are on the front line, whether they express it openly or not, are living the expression of that courage. You say we learn things by being with our patients, and we also learn things by seeing each other at work. So those people who are at work, who are in the units, who are in the screening areas, the emergency rooms, those people are courageous. They are exposing themselves, sometimes with a conscious awareness, sometimes without strong awareness, but they're exposing themselves, and they probably know it. But in spite of this, they go ahead with the work. As a result, the public sees a face of medicine that it normally does not think about, which is the face of courage and concern about others. So they're willing to simply show up and do what needs to be done as part of the medical profession. And this is a critical element in our profession that often I think is not as generally appreciated by the public until they need us. It may be that individuals who need us appreciate it when they encounter us one to one, but here the public as a whole has a chance to encounter the profession as a whole and find out what really matters. They find out who really delivers the important care when someone is sick. So I see this as an opportunity to highlight this important relationship of need, trust, and courage.
Professor, do you think we have to be prepared to take care of our patient even we are afraid of being sick? Because this viral situation, this sickness, is very stressful. Are we prepared to take care of ourselves in these situations?
Well, I think this is a very difficult question and is ultimately a very personal question. I don't think anyone should be forced to do more than they feel capable of doing or that they feel willing to do. Some people may not wish to expose themselves because of family, because of age, or for other reasons. And I think it would be wrong of us, and especially wrong of administrative bodies, to try and force physicians to do things that they themselves don't feel capable of doing. Nor do I think there should be any moral judgment levied against people who don't feel that this is something that they should do. I think we can have discussions among ourselves. We are fortunate that there are enough people who are willing to work right now to do the necessary work and provide the necessary services. But I do not believe that people should be forced into doing things that they themselves may not feel capable of doing.
I think this topic of fear, Professor Moshman and Professor Felix, is very important. And it moves directly on to my second question. As Professor Felix mentioned, health professionals feel threatened and frightened during these days. And during these days around the world, we've seen health professionals putting their lives at risk. And sometimes with little or inadequate protection. And this is probably one of the key points. How important, when the health professionals feel vulnerable in this way, how important is the care and the support amongst fellow professionals? Professor Felix, what do you think about this?
we I have to start with we are a team with nurses, with the other personnel, even with the administrative personnel. We are a team. We have to take care of us as a team, even as a family, because sometimes we are living with those persons more hours than with even our families. We have to, it's a very, the trust between us would be complete because they are your partners. They are living with you a lot of things. Even when you have a patient in a critical situation, your feelings, your thoughts are in a team mode. You do a thing, your teams are doing another things, but you have to take care of yourself as a team, as a family. I think it's a very difficult situation if you don't trust your team, if you don't trust your family. You can make a mistake, and somebody has to tell you that you are in a mistake, that you are doing a wrong thing. That's the kind of truth that I'm telling. We need to talk to our team, to our partners. We have to trust. I think if you don't trust your team, I don't know what are you doing there. You need to communicate. You need to express yourself to get that trust. What do you think about Professor Moswin?
Well, these days the emphasis on teams is very important, and there's no question that groups of people or teams of people are important in delivering care. But the question is, what are the relative contributions of the individuals of these teams? Everyone brings certain special skills to such a group, and the doctor brings two kinds of special skills to the group. One is a very advanced knowledge about the nature of the illness and the way in which clinical decisions are made, and the ability to follow the patient and make a critical decision. The second is the doctor, I believe, still is a moral voice in society. And the team tends, the team tends to look up to the doctor for guidance, unless the doctor has in some way either misled them or shown that he or she is not capable of providing such leadership. So sometimes the nurse can be the key leader because the nurse spends so much time at the bedside. Sometimes a physical therapist can be a team leader in the sense that they know how well a patient is moving. But the importance of the doctor, I think, is very, very critical. I brought with me just a few books that I wanted to mention that I think are relevant to this crisis. And the first of these, I just mentioned the titles for our listeners. The first one, I don't have a physical copy because it's almost impossible to get it, but it is written by Axel Munthe, Munthe. Axel Munthe was a Swedish physician of the late 19th, early 20th century. And as a young man in 1884, he volunteered to work in a cholera epidemic in Naples, Italy. At that time, if you were infected by cholera, the mortality rate was 60%, and there was no treatment. Today, cholera can be treated with hydration and antibiotics, and the mortality drops drastically unless there's very poor structural civilization conditions to administer the care. So you can imagine the kind of risk that Axel Munthe exposed himself to. The book is called Letters to a Morning City, with the British spelling of the word morning, Mourning. It was published in 1885 in Swedish, 1910 in Italian, and is available in English. It's a very simple diary of a young doctor in very difficult circumstances. But it was 135 years ago. But still, I think one sees a great deal of how an individual works in this session. He himself was a Protestant. He worked with Catholic orders of nuns to try and provide care for patients. So I think this shows some kind of leadership of the sort that I'm talking about. The second of these books, I'll show you the copy here, is by a Japanese physician. The Japanese physician is Michihiko Hachiya, Hachhiya. The book is entitled Hiroshima Diary. He was present in Hiroshima when the first of the two American bombs went off. He survived the original blast and then, out of very limited conditions, provided medical care for unknown illnesses, which at that time was radiation sickness. No one had ever seen it before. He was taking care of patients, trying to work scientifically with his colleagues, and providing physical care in very, very difficult circumstances. And the final book I wanted to show to you is this one entitled Token of a Covenant. by Hans Graf von Lehndorff. Lehndorff was a surgeon in Prussia, which was then northeastern Poland, at the end of World War II when the Russians came back in. So the Russians were then taking a great deal of vengeance out on the German natives of this area. And it describes his situation in a prison camp, being a doctor to both his own people and also to the Germans, and then trying to provide medical care, operating under circumstances of malnutrition, vitamin C deprivation, typhus, tuberculosis, and malaria. So these are very horrifying conditions, far worse than what we're experiencing now. But I think for the listeners of this conference, it gives an idea of what physicians are capable of under enormous duress. And these people give us a kind of inspiration across time for the sorts of things that are important when we think about the relationship between doctors and society.
Sorry for interrupting. I find it fascinating the inclusion of those three books, Professor Moshvin, and also your expression inspiration across time. And I'd like to kind of make a comment about this. Historically, there are three figures in the village or in the town who are respected. Three members of society who everybody looked up to. They were the cleric, the clergyman. I'm talking about a Western society. I'm talking about basically my English background, the teacher and the doctor. Is this still true, Professor Moshvin? Are these three, or we're concentrating on the doctor or the health professional, are they still as respected as before?
I'm going to defer this to Dr. Soriano because in some ways he is all three, both clinician, a teacher of his children, and also cleric in the sense that he provides a sort of a spiritual hope and guidance to his patients. So, Jose, I'm turning this over to you.
I think society is changing every day. I think society is taking out the rules. For me, of course, a teacher is a very important person in our society. Of course, spiritual, I don't know, spiritual persons too, clergyship, and doctors, of course. But society has another ideas, and we see it every day. They are changing about who they admire, who they are following. I think some bloggers from some YouTubers are has a lot of power, has a lot of society side on them, and we have to change that. We have to transform ourselves and move every day. We have to be doctors who teach. We have to be doctors who joined in a way to say we are sharing a difficult way right now in this pandemic situation. We have to do a lot of things. Not only doctors, not only teachers, not only clerkship. We have to feel our patients, join or trying to be with their. I think we can move from only a clinical situation to a human situation. If we see our patients in all the stuff, the body, the disease, the soul, we are doing a lot, and we can change what society think about us, what society think about teachers. I think we can move or the way we live as a doctors, as a teachers, as a clergyship. We have to think in another way, in a very human way. If we can do that, we can connect. We can connect to our patient. We can connect with our patient, and we can do a lot of things different. I see with my children, if you play with them in the middle of a chemotherapy session, you are different. You are not a doctor. They don't admire the doctor. They are playing with a friend. If you tell me, if you ask me, I can tell you, if you are a friend of your patient, if you connect in this level with your patient, you are even more than a doctor can do with them. What do you think about this, Professor Moswin?
Oh, well, I think you've said it very well. When I graduated from medical school, the professor of medicine had a few comments for us. As all our students know, the emphasis during student years is on the biomedical science, the clinical skills, as it should be. We must know these things, otherwise we cannot really do the kind of medicine that people expect from us. But at the same time, there is a fusion, sort of a maturation of both sincerity and also knowledge. So our professor of medicine said to us, remember that the public will not be impressed by your brilliance, but by your sincerity. And I think this is what you're saying about the children. They sense you as a person first, even though you have all the necessary skills. I think the real master of medicine is the one who has all the skills but doesn't make a big deal out of it. Comes across as a person first, but has all the knowledge and skill to pull out of his or her bag whenever it's necessary. So that knowledge and experience is never wanting, but always it's the person first who presents to the patient. Once the relationship is established, you can do what you need to do.
Do you think, gentlemen, in these days in different countries, there's been a big support for health professionals, doctors, nurses? At 8 o'clock in Spain, everybody's been going out onto their balconies, making music and celebrating the work of the doctors and the health professionals fighting against this terrible disease. Do you think that health professionals are the modern day heroes and heroines? Do you think that this is a fact?
I hope Boris Johnson keeps talking about how wonderful the NHS is. I give him a lot of credit for doing that. But I think time will tell. A year after the epidemic settles, we'll see how the public talks about medicine and how it treats it, how it treats its practitioners. This is a very complicated subject that goes beyond our conference today, which is the relationship of physicians to each other in organizations and the relationship of other organizations to us as individuals and as a group of skilled people. So that is a subject that goes far beyond. It's a very interesting one, but it's also a political subject, and I think it really should not be our topic today. But I just want to bring it up.
This is one of the questions I was going to ask you: the chasm between the policymakers and the professionals, the health professionals. But mightn't this be, I know you don't want to talk about it, but it's an interesting, just to have a little detour. Mightn't health professionals become stronger from this and have more of a say and more importance in the policy making? I'm talking about the health professionals, as it were, on the front line, the health professionals see patients. Because there are a lot of health professionals working as policymakers, but they don't see patients. Maybe this COVID-19 will allow the health professionals helping in these times have more power and more say. Is this possible, Professor Moswin?
Well, the future is hard to predict, as we've learned. I think it's no different with this subject. I don't know what to say, to be perfectly honest. I suspect that things have a way of reverting and people have a way of going back home. And in some ways, only a small amount of new activity will be generated. I did want to bring up an article that appeared in the New York Times on June 8th of 2019 by Danielle Ofri, O-F-R-I. This is a name that probably is familiar to many of the participants in the symposium. Danielle Ofri is a very skilled internist and also a writer, and she's very interested in the inner lives of physicians and protecting physicians' rights. She wrote a very provocative article, with the title alone is very provocative. The title is "The Business of Healthcare Depends on Exploiting Doctors and Nurses." This is a very provocative title and raises some of the issues that are sort of touched upon by our conversation right now. Now, I don't wish to render opinion about this, but I think that there are some very interesting things brought up in this article, one of which is the way in which the electronic medical record is sort of affecting doctors and nurses. I think that's probably not the key point. The key point is the title alone is already very, very provocative and could draw lines of distinction between administrations. and healthcare professionals. Right now, it's the healthcare professionals who are on the front line, our brothers and sisters in medicine. They're the ones on the front line. So I will leave it at that for the time being. Jose, I don't know what the situation is in Anahuac, but perhaps because healthcare systems are different in every country, and I'm most familiar with our own and less familiar with NHS or with other systems. I have some familiarity with them, but I will now transfer over to Jose and see what he has to say about the situation in Anahuac.
I think the situation is very different, even because we are in a different countries. We are in a poor country. I have to say that the relationship between our health system and the even the academic formation of our physician is very different. We are right now in a very difficult situation if they are or interns working in the hospital in a critical situation. The hours in our system are more hours than other systems. They are stressful time. They have a lot of hours working in the hospital, and the situation is difficult with the administrative personnel. I think we have to think what we can do taking care of the mind of our students, in the soul of our students, trying to prepare them do this in these critical situations. We have to do a lot of things. We have to teach a lot of things, a lot of things to take care of our students, of our residents. We have to we have to give more specific topics about administration, about taking care of your patient, taking care of your health system. I think, and I don't know what you can tell me, if we can teach how to take care of your patient, Professor Moswin, with your system, what do you, I know we have to take care about our patient. We have to take care of patient, but you have to take care first of your health system to help a lot of person or more persons if you take care of your health system.
Well, the one I want to circle back to what Dr. Offrey wrote and suggest that perhaps one solution to this kind of challenge is to include administration in our conversations, in our conferences. I think they are the missing element, and yet they are such an important force in creating and presenting the structure of delivery of medical care. I think they should be brought in and they should get to know us as people and vice versa, just as we're saying about getting to know each other as people. So I would invite administrators to come join this kind of a conference and hear what we have to say and express their own interests as well. With regard to our colleagues in medicine, what I learned in working in small groups is the groups that actually work together get to know each other well, and also if they somehow live together. And by living together, I don't necessarily mean going to restaurants and bars. I mean simply getting to know each other as people, and that takes time. It takes time. And if you have a lot of fragmented rotations, it's more difficult. That's why people working together for longer periods of time, after a while, just get to know each other. My experiences in laboratory work, for example, where I spent 3 to 4 years working with one small group, I got to know these people extremely well, and the work became a smaller subset of our relationships as people. And I think in good functioning teams of the sort that you describe in pediatrics, people who know each other very well, the relationship becomes like a family, and the patients become somewhat like they're both patients, they're children, they're friends, but the structure of that group, that family type group, is a very important one. That's what really makes the difference in providing good care, I think.
Okay.
We're closing to the end of the first section, but I'd like each one of you just to kind of finalize or finish off this fascinating first section, which, as everybody knows, could go on for many, many more minutes or hours. Because I, as you mentioned, when you met in December, you spoke for 2 hours non-stop. So this exciting and very stimulating and very important conversation could go on, but we need to keep to our time. but I'd like each of you to just finish off with one sentence about what you think is the most important about this topic. I don't know who would like to start. Maybe let's start with our colleague from Mexico, Dr. Felix.
Thank you. Thank you. If I have to say something about the care of our health professionals, I have to say that we have to be conscious of who we are, what we are doing, why we are doing this. We are heroes or heroines, of course, but of our own lives. We don't have to be the heroes of the other persons. We have to be the leaders of our skills, of our own practice, of our own feelings. If we are, if we have the self-confidence in in a very high top, that will be the best skill to protect ourselves, even in the physical, in the biological way, but most important, in the soul, in the human way. If we know who we are, where we are, why we are here, why we are nurses, why we are doctors, why we are taking care of our patients. If we know all this stuff, we are we are in a very high protection about all these things. The stress is very high. The difficult patient, the critical patients are a lot of patients right now. Here in Mexico, we are taking this pandemic in a very critical situation, and we have to be prepared. And the first skill that we have to develop is our soul, our soul skill, or mind skill, and then we are able to see our patients and ourselves too.
Thank you very much, Dr. Felix. I take from that we need to be the heroes of our own lives. And I think it's a very nice ending comment. And Dr. Moshfin?
Well, I would like to, first of all, be sure that we give credit where credit is due, and that is to those people who are on the front line. They represent the profession in an honorable way, and I think we should all be very grateful to their displays of courage. To all the students and younger people who are viewing this, I would urge you strongly to look very, very frankly at the facts and the rules that currently control our lives as physicians, and think about what kind of a medicine you would like to have in the future. Not just all the science and the personal relationships, but what kind of a structure of medicine you would like to have in your society.
Thank you very much, Professor Moshfin. Think about what kind of medicine you would like to have in the future. I thank you both very, very much, but we haven't finished, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very opposite to finishing. And we have a question from Greece. Dora, can you ask the question, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, okay, so hello to everyone. It's such a pleasure to attend this virtual symposium, and I'm really grateful to Jonathan and the rest of the team. At those difficult times, putting all this group of people together, physicians among others, and doctors, and everyone interested, it's such a delightful opportunity. Now, since I would first like to make a comment, since I'm picking up on this heroic representation of doctors, that it actually draws back into ancient history. I mean, even in Iliad, Homer presented doctors as worth of many other people. So a physician is worth of many other people. So this heroic representation goes back in time. Now, my question is this. We do understand all this effort that the doctors are putting, especially in those days. And my worry is that usually there is a huge problem in finding the right time and allocate enough time either to establish a doctor-to-doctor relationship or a doctor-to-patient relationship. It's such an oxymoron because in those days we all found more than enough time, with the exception, again, of physicians and healthcare professionals. But again, we're not only they were lacking time because they were, running around like crazy trying to take care of all these people. So even outside the pandemic, this situation, usually there's lack of time, and I can't solve this puzzle. How can you as physicians, allocate more time in order to establish a better relationship between either among colleagues or between a doctor and a patient?
Who'd like to go first?
Okay, I have to say that if you have a little bit of time to get involved or get a very good relation with your patient, I think details make the difference. Smiling, seeing eye to eye to the eyes of your patient will be a good start. If you have a few minutes if you don't have enough time with your patient, details are important for me.
Professor Mushman?
Well, we're spending some time together right now in this very novel form of online symposium, so I think that is a good sign. I think of medical doctors as officers who have graduated from a military academy and are now out in the front. And many times they have to work individually. Men or women are working by themselves. They may see others, but they're really working very hard as individuals, much as a country cleric would in a small parish. And then every now and then they come together in a variety of ways, like this. So I think that efforts made when you find other physicians, you know them, they know you, you have an opportunity for connection. So that's one thing. I have also found, as I mentioned several of these books, I have found that the reading of biographies and memoirs by physicians is a wonderful way to deepen your relationship with the profession and with people who have come before us or who are working now. And finally, I would say the kind of time that I think you're talking about is what we would call internal or qualitative time. It is the sense of time and the sense of duration, not time as it's measured by the clock, but time as it is felt by us internally and felt by the other person. So meaningful contact can be short, but can be meaningful. Long periods of contact can be very cold and impersonal. So it really depends on the quality of that time that you provide.
Thank you both very much. And Professor Moshwin, on the topic of the importance of reading and reading memoirs of other doctors and patients, the books that you have mentioned will be, we will show them on the Microsoft Teams so everybody has the reference. And also we will upload the article by Daniel Offrey as well so people can see that as well. Thank you very much for your first
grain
question.
of salt. Read Danielle's article with a grain of salt. It's very provocative.
We're here to be provoked. No, provocative is good. No.
I don't want to support the New York Times. I'm just saying, read it with a grain of salt.
Okay, we have another question. Thank you very much for the first question, Dora, from Greece, and now we have another question from Danielle. I don't know, Danielle, where you are. Are you in Mexico? It's possible. Hello? Danielle? He said he had a question. Do we have any more questions? Now is your moment to ask some questions. I'm wondering whether we have a question. Anybody? Benedetta from La Sapienza. Oh, sorry.
I think, Daniel, you should take off the mute button because you have it open, so we can hear you.
Oh, we have another question. Okay, Daniel, are you okay? Can you listen? Because we have a question from Gabriella, I think, or Gabrielle.
Hi, I'm Gabriella.
Yeah, it's me. Hi.
Oh, Daniel first. Okay. Explain who you are first, please.
I'm Gabriel Cajuc from Anáhuac University in Mexico. I'm a medical student. I was wondering, well, much is said about the great competition there is between medical students and physicians to gain a better position or to have more publications, to get into medical school even. It is huge, and in medical schools there is much kind of like a cold war between students to get a better GPA and to excel and to succeed, even if it is harmful for others. So how do you think this affects the physician's future as a human leader, or it benefits him or her in his path?
I'm very glad you brought that up. That's such an important topic. And I think that as long as we acknowledge that this is the case, that it becomes easier to deal with. In my own experience, I have found that interacting with physicians outside of my specialty is somewhat easier because the level of competition is very different there. Usually we have competed in different sort of categories, and when we come together, there's more equality, and this is very helpful. So various kinds of organizations and committees where you can work with other physicians and nurses who represent their own specialty, I think is very helpful. The second analogy I would make is that of professional sports. Take tennis, for example, where people fight each other bitterly on the court, and then afterwards they shake hands and they end up sort of commentating. They become commentators for Wimbledon later on, sitting at the same table. So on the one hand, they're both intensely competitive when they're younger, but when they get old, somehow they're all part of the same group. So I'm glad you brought it up because it is very important. It's a fact of life, and I think we should discuss it more.
I think it's a very, very interesting question, but it's a self question. The world asks you some stuff. This competition, be the best, has the best grades, but it depends on you. If you are calm, if you are happy with your grades, with your knowledge, with your relationship with your patient, with your partners, I think is the most important thing. The people is asking you to be the best all the time. Even you are asking yourself to be the best all the time, but it depends on you. It depends of what you are looking for in this life. It depends of who you are and where you want to be. If you wanna write 100 of review articles, do it. If you don't want to write any articles, I think you can do it. It depends on you. I think the answer depends on what you want about yourself all your life. Thank you.
It depends on you. Know thyself. I suppose this is one of the most important ideas coming from this. Know thyself, no? We have another question. Paula from Madrid. Paula, can you ask your question, please? Introduce yourself to everybody.
Hello, everybody. I'm Paula. I'm a medical student from Madrid, and I already participated in the last symposium in Moscow. So thank you very much for this really interesting conversation. I was wondering if you would have any specific recommendation for health professionals which are coping with all this like really stressful situation regarding their mental health, because here in Spain there's been like lots of information going around about this whole situation affecting mental health and how it can even affect the treatment doctors give their patients. So I was wondering if you had any recommendation regarding that.
It's a fantastic question, and maybe I'd like to pass on to Professor Moshkin first.
I'm not sure I have an easy answer for this. I think one has to take this experience one day at a time with a certain amount of hope and caution. Some of this depends on your personal resilience and your personal resources. And we all have our ways in which we adapt to difficult circumstances. whether it's becoming a very introverted and listening to music when we get away or reading, or we become very extroverted, which is harder now. But if we have family, if we have our Facebook connections, if we have our social media, things of that sort, there's no question that there is no easy answer for this, because we are all different in terms of what we need to maintain our personal resilience. But I think this is what it takes to endure a situation like this. There is hope that eventually this is all going to pass, and we will all, those of us who are going to live, we're going to live, and we're going to meet again someday.
I agree totally with Professor Moswin. If I had an answer, the answer is love. Love yourself. This kind of love can be taking therapy. This kind of love can be sharing your feelings, crying. We need to take care of ourselves. And if you do it lovely, you can do a lot in this topic, because it's very difficult, it's very stressful, is frightening. I think sharing these feelings is the best way to control them.
Thank you very much. We have what? Sorry, Professor Mosman.
And that's what we're doing now.
Yes, that's we are here right now.
Fantastic. I think there's one more question. Don't forget that this isn't the end. The session is going to be over, but after the session there will be ways of contacting both Professor Mosman, both Professor Felix, and also there will be a Padlet, so you can ask questions, you can give your comments on the Padlet, and this will be open for the duration of the 2 months. So this is not the end by any means, but time is always in charge. So we have one more question from Daniel. Please, Daniel.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning,
Yes.
everyone, or good day. My name is Daniel Nambos, and I'm a fourth-year med student in the Instituto Politécnico Nacional. And my question is this. For a time, the relationship between physicians and patients have been deteriorating and have become more complicated to establish this relationship. What do you think we, the medical personnel, are we doing wrong, or we have been doing to make this trust gap between us and the patients, and what we can do to change this?
Very good question, Daniel. Why is wrong right now this relationship? Why we are attacked all the time, and I'm not talking about only the nurse and the doctors. We are attacked ourselves every day. The violent situations, the economic situation are very stressful, and I think it's a continued battle in the street all the time. It's not only this pandemic situation. This pandemic situation only is showing us something that is right behind us. But what can we do? We have to be very, very emotional. We have to have a lot of emotional intelligence. Fake news, we don't have to hear them. We don't have to spread them. We have to have a lot of self-confidence. If you have a very trustful relationship, if you talk to your patient with the truth, I think you can find another way to see your patient, and they going to start seeing you in another way. It's very difficult right now because there are a lot of things. There is a lot of noise in the street. Excuse me if I use this word again, but you have to take control of yourself. Then you can take control of your relation with your patient. True is the first word that I can use, and love. Be care of your own love, the love of your patient, your relation with them. Professor Moswin?
So I would say that the love or the care for others that you describe can be practically employed in two ways. First, for good relations with patients, you must understand the illness of your patient. If you do not understand the illness of the patient, sooner or later the relationship will break down. The second is you must see your patient as a human being who is living the illness, not as an example of the disease that you have studied. There are several ways to do this. Some people just have natural empathy and understand this right away. But many, myself included, it takes time to learn this. There are several ways in which one learns it. First is just a lot of experience with people. Second, I think if one has had an illness of one's own or someone very close to us, a family member that we care about, has been sick, I think we come much closer to understanding what illness means. And thirdly, and one of the reasons that I support the use of written materials, a lot of patients have written about their experiences. And you don't have to limit your contact with those patients to 10 minutes in clinic. You can spend several hours reading their personal accounts of illness and let them speak in their own voice so that you can hear it. If you read like this, if you listen to people, if you have your own personal experiences with illness, you will see your patients as human beings and not just as examples of diseases that you have studied.
Professor Moswin, excuse me if I ask you this question. Empathy will be this experience that you are telling us? Practice empathy?
Yes, I think when you can see, when you can go beyond yourself and try to appreciate what might be going on with the other person as another person, sort of what Martin Buber wrote about when he talked about the dialogue with God, I and thou, this very personal kind of dialogue. This is the heart, and this is what you, Jose, are talking about. When you talk about love for another, this is what you are talking about also. At least that's how I understand it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you both very much. And I've got another article to put in the document. So Martin Buber, I and Thou, which I think is a fascinating article, a classic, and also one that sometimes people don't know about and don't know about its relevance to clinical practice. We have two more questions. I know I'm prolonging, but there are two more questions, and then we will finish at least by video conference for today. But as I said, this is by no means, this is just the beginning. But first of all, we have a question from Cesar. Cesar, please try to make the question short and snappy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm very thankful about this symposium. It's the first time I was in something like this. Okay, to make this short, you know, the historical, the healthcare professionals were something more important for society, but you know, nowadays the technology, the distance, the globalization has to be something more like just a professional. But this situation, the pandemic, is showing us that, as the Dr. Felix said, the teamwork has been important. Nowadays is the vital point, you know, but it's just a pandemic way, as you can tell us from your point of view. This is just temporal, or it's gonna evolve the way we saw the teamwork and the medicine, also for the benefit for the patient or just for ourselves, the healthcare professionals?
My short answer to this is, as they say on television in America, stay tuned. We will find out. I don't think we know the answer to this, but you've stated the question so perfectly. I just think we have to wait and see.
I think the same. You can have all the answers. You can have all the situation, but if you want to be the same than yesterday, the same than the last year, it will be like that. I think depends in every person, depends each team what they are going to do with this experience. The time will tell us, as Professor Moswin said.
So you see, Jose, you and I are both experienced clinicians, and we have learned not to make too many predictions because we know that we can be overtaken by events.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we move on to Pelayo. Pelayo, can you introduce yourself and ask the question?
Yes, hello, I'm Pelayo. I'm a first-year medical student from the University of Pompeu Fabra in Spain. And I'd like to, as a medical student and actually a very recent medical student, I'd like to ask you about how to start building up the resilience, this strength that we might need to tackle difficult situations that we might encounter along our career, and as today that we are in such a crisis.
Good question. Very good question. Who wants to begin to answer this question? Because it's a fabulous question, Lyle.
I'll go back, Jonathan, to your quotation of John Donne, that no man is an island, and that includes medical students. And medical school, we do not live just in the island of the medical school. We live in a broad social, cultural context. So you came from that context, and don't give it up. Just because you go to medical school, you don't have to give up the other things that you are interested in life. In fact, the other interests that you have in life will enrich your contributions to the profession and to your patients.
Fantastic answer.
Of course. What can I tell you? I can say that you have to live this. You have to be conscious of these situations. You have to learn in silence inside of you. You have to rethink what you are doing with your team, with your relationship with your patient, with your family, with your own life. This pandemic situation take us to a place that we were in before. That's an opportunity to think new ways of being live.
Thank you both very much.
Both the answers were superb, and I think we're finishing there, unless we have one question from Nikita from Moscow. Nikita, do you want to ask your question? He's written today that the truth and justice, or the justice to healthcare, is critical or crucial. Healthcare workers bear a heavy responsibility with that. I don't know if you want to make any comments about or any questions. If not, because there are many more questions, I'm sure. But I think this is a good moment after the question from Pelayo, from a first-year student in Spain. Resilience, how to gain the resilience, and the answers from our distinguished experts today were excellent. I think that you do not need to change yourself. You need to be yourself, and you need probably in these moments to look deeper into yourself to find the sources of strength to cope with the situation. But I'd like to leave on a positive note. It's been a very, very interesting afternoon, morning, or whatever time of day it is in wherever you are. It's been fascinating, but this is the beginning. I will upload all the references, and I'd just like to give an enormous round of applause for Professor Jacek Moszpin and Professor Jose Felix. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. The pleasure for you being here.
It was a great pleasure participating. I think we had a very good time, and again, a wonderful display of how we can support each other.
Of course. Thank you, Professor Moswin. It's wonderful to see you and to hear you. Professor Jonathan, thank you.
And see you next week. Next week, we have a roundtable with doctors and medical students talking about the topic, but from a different angle. So next week will be slightly different, but with similar themes. So thank you very much, everybody. Don't forget to continue to contribute. You can write your ideas on the Padlet. David will be in touch with everybody. I will be in touch with everybody. This is just the beginning. And I'd like to thank everybody today for participating and for making this a very nice beginning to the first Doctor as a Humanist virtual symposium. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Stay well, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.